Hello. I am going to mute these headphones. Trying to experiment with these, but there's a delay in this from what I hear. Wonder. No, I'll keep this mic on. No, I have to put them in. Testing. Yeah, there's a little lag. But if somebody does come in, there shouldn't be a lag when I hear them, so that'll work. All right. So I thought, maybe we can talk books, and why books are important to me. I got paranoid a while back about books when I started seeing them deleting. What's up, Scott? When I saw them deleting stuff on the internet. So stories from 10, 20 years ago, and they were going into the website, changing the words. And it made me think, what's to stop them from doing that with PDF books or books that are scanned, or publishers doing something different to not offend people? So I was watching, what's his name? Hey, Marcus. I was watching, I forget his name. The guy, one of the founders of Wikipedia, and he was freaking out about this. I've shared this with Corner before, and he was explaining that he could see that what they created was great, but the way that the hierarchy was set up and how they vet stories and articles, things that are put on Wikipedia, was a group of people, and you had to be approved to be in this group. And he was saying the large majority of them are from a particular political persuasion, but doesn't mean they're nefarious. He just could see the error in that. So I forget whose podcast he was on that I was watching, and he came up with this. Here, this will get us into this. And you'll have to let me know if the sound goes down. This mic seems to pick up pretty good from a pretty good distance. So if it's a problem, I'll switch over to these headphones. Let me do this. Yeah, there we go. So he had started this this company. Let's see if you can see it. It says ZWI Books, and there's almost 70,000 books on this. So what's cool is, so what you don't see on my bookshelf, it's on this bad boy. So this is pretty cool, and it's solid state. That way, nothing's gonna disappear. So anyway, let's see here. Where should we start? I'll start up on the top. How's my voice? Can you hear me? Yeah. So I've got, this is the 1840 Webster Dictionary that I use a lot when I talk to people about definitions, which I think is very important. I forget how old this Bible is. Probably a King James. It's pretty old. So those are my two oldies. But then I got C.S. Lewis, and this is a easy one I can lend out because it's got 5 of his classics. Let's see if actually, no, I stand corrected. It's got 8. So you know what they are. You know the good ones. How to Read Psalms and Understand the Psalms by Waki. That's a good book. It really helps you see the art in the way that the psalm is constructed, the inclusios, the chiasms. Thank you. And so that's pretty cool. Yeah, this is a book I use a lot. I like it. And it helps me understand the context of the psalm. And something I'd heard a long time ago is, since we believe that this is the word of God, yeah, David wrote most of them, right? But the other upside is, if you read this if it's a prayer or a song, imagine David singing it, praying it, but then imagine Jesus singing it and praying it. And then maybe even put me into that, obviously. So it's cool to read it through 3 different perspectives, which I think is pretty cool. Let's see. I don't know how bumpy this is becoming. So I have Lectures to My Students from Charles Spurgeon. That's a really good book. I've done a lot of this in audio. Some of these have been mostly audio because I like reading and audio, but this one I actually did audio before I even got this book. A friend of mine taught me this book. I got to hear an interview from this Nick Needham, and he was pretty remarkable because he was very unbiased to history, which is unusual, especially from somebody from the Reformed tradition. Usually they're very, bent to their own tradition. And so I thought that this would be a good collection to have. It's called 2,000 Years of Christ's Power. He starts off, what's the first section? The first one's early church fathers. Yeah, the age of the early church fathers. That's probably my favorite one. And then it moves all the way into America and, the Awakening. So it's a really good collection. He's thinking about doing a 6th book. But I don't know if there's much to write there. Everybody's skewed on how they see history and even how we see today. So a lot of these I was given, so I don't have a full collection of some of this stuff, so it's just random. This is the International Critical Commentary by Scribner's. It goes from Micah to Joel. Scribner's is the publisher, by the way. But yeah, this is pretty cool. So like if you wanted, you'd see some of the minor prophets and hear some commentary. Smith, Ward, and Brewer, the authors. And then of course, good old back in the day, Vernon McGee. This is Through the Bible, the Old Testament, volume 1 and 2. So Genesis to Deuteronomy, Joshua, Psalms. That's cool. And then of course I have a little bit of Calvin stuff. Good Calvinist that I am, right? Who can hate me? Mostly Christian. I would say there are some there are some that are not from my tradition, mostly out of curiosity, but I would say it's mostly so that I know what I'm talking about when I'm reading about someone else's faith from their faith, it's helpful. It's not perfect, right? So they have their own framework. And so I guess I'm just caveating that with that. But anyway, Calvin's commentary. This is on Isaiah. Calvin. 4 volumes just for Isaiah. His commentaries are not easy to read. I'll just tell you that right now. Then I have Calvin's Select Works, all 7 volumes. It goes from the tracts all the way to the letters that he wrote. A lot of the fathers and priests and political figures that he had issues with. So that's how I know a little about Servetus. People misrepresent that quite often. This right here is the history and theology of Calvin. That's a really good one. That's a big boy there. It's like a massive book. But it's a great reference book. And then these right here are my commentaries. So I got the classics, Barnes. Barnes notes are always pretty popular. A lot of people know them. I don't know if anybody in the comments mentioned anything about that. Yeah, Edwards Young. Yeah, 100%. So this is Barnes on New Testament. So I got from Matthew all the way to Revelation, which is sweet to have the full collection. And then I have the whole, except for I think one. I'm trying to remember. Oh, yeah, I'm missing the most important one, I think, in the collection, which is the Genesis, which is a real bummer. But, anybody has that book. But these are Barnes, the more recent edition. I think it's a little easier to read than the older ones here. And then I have the Broadman Bible commentaries, and these are from Genesis. Well, let me put it this way. I don't know if you can see past the wire here. It's 1 through 10 minus 9, and then there's still, I don't know, maybe probably 12 total books in that collection. So I do not have all of them, which is a bummer. Let's see here. Here, you want to see the setup? Yeah. Helps it a lot having a lot of screens. So anyway, that's some of the main ones. And then the down here, this is pretty cool because I've got Spurgeon's sermons. I've got 1 through 10, which is really cool. A friend of mine just got me this book. It's on Galatians. Furious. Yeah, he was pretty pissed off in that book when he wrote it, or that letter. Anyway, so I thought that was going to be pretty cool to look at that. A lot of these are reference books, so on this shelf. So you got the Rose Bible charts, maps, and timelines. I've got the original one, which is pretty comprehensive. I've got the deluxe, and these are pretty cool. Let's see if I can pull this out. I don't know if I've ever showed this to anybody in the. See here. Yeah, this is really cool. So check this out. So this gives you the Bible timeline. And it also gives you what the other world was doing. So you have Bible history in blue, world history in beige, and then Middle East history. So for instance, this little box here, by the way, brings us up to Abraham, from creation to Abraham in timelines based on biblical genealogy, right? So, but here's where Abraham starts. So they start the timeline at Abraham. But if you look here, I don't know if it's going to come out clear or not. Let's see. Let's see how good I can get this. Yeah, it's going to suck. Yeah. So anyway, you can kind of see it starts at Adam, 930 years, and you see his timeline. And then it shows Seth, Enoch, Keen, I don't know how to pronounce that one, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah. So if you look at Methuselah, he's 969. That's how many years? His timeline goes all the way past Noah. So he's living all the way up until the flood. So the flood line comes right down where Adam's children die. So it's pretty interesting. So the idea that it was password or the telephone game, it's like here's Adam, here's Noah. The gap between these gentlemen, very small. So there would have been a lot of children, fathers, grandfathers that would have been able to be speaking directly to Noah about what's up. The other interesting thing is if you look at, this is Abraham here. You see Noah's timeline. So Abraham was born before Noah died. So it shows you, no, this is as close as you can get, but people would argue this. But I do think it's an interesting timeline when you start plotting it out and you say, oh, from Adam to Abraham, how many people were still alive that were talking, that had passed this on orally, and it was a big deal to them. And so when you show someone this, they're like, I had no idea. They're thinking of generations like we live. And they're like, no, it's, 100 years a person. And it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So he lived 1,000 years. Who cares? But they're distancing these, making them seem like this timeline is stretched out way longer. And so it's just kind of ironic, the inaccuracy. But yeah, it's cool. You have Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, and then you have Joseph. And then in the Middle Kingdom at this time, you have the dynasty of Egypt. This is the 11th and 12th dynasty at this point. And this, you can see first cigarettes of Ur name you, Middle East, Old Kingdom period, pyramids built. I'm sure there's conspiracy theorists, but it says 2700 AD or BC to 2200. And so when you look up here, it's right around when Abraham was running around. And then, of course, let's see, Moses is way over here. So the pyramids, you have Middle Kingdom, second intermediate period. It's pretty cool because you can see the pharaohs and their dynasties, and you can see the slavery in Egypt, Moses, and the gap between Joseph and Moses, about 300 years. So in that time period, they forgot about Joseph, right, and enslaved Israel. China dynasty. So like this world history is interesting just because you can kind of touch on what's going on in the rest of the world at that time. So anyway, Rose is a really good resource. I have one that I lend out, which is easier, more of a normal book. It's not as pullouts and stuff like that. Constantinople, Istanbul's historical heritage. It's a really cool book. It's got a lot of art. I think Ortho folks would like to look through that. Essentials of Judaism. This was kind of funny. Idiots understanding Judaism. Hey, man, I had to start somewhere. Confessions of the Faith, classic. Catechism of the Catholic Church. I think it's important to know their catechesis, especially if I'm going to hold to a Heidelberg Catechism. Good old Burkhoff. I've had multiple copies of this. I've lent out, and this is a really good systematic theology. This is what we get in trouble for, being too precise, systematic, and going through the Bible biblically, contextually. We get in trouble for that. Of course, you got Strong's exhaustive concordance with the Hebrew, Chaldee, and the Greek. So this is the Mac Daddy. I've got a specific Greek concordance. I've got a Greek lexicon. So both of these are really cool. This was interesting. I found this on a table. I've never had a need for it, but I thought if I ever wanted to mess around with Martin Luther stuff, I got English, Germany dictionary. This was well, it's really my only one. I was going to say my first, but I'll probably get another one. But the first Greek New Testament. And I was trying to explain to somebody when they start arguing about translations. How am I doing? Not bad. So I've explained this to somebody, but in the bottom of the book, each one of these verses has a letter coding. And so what happens is down here, they rank the translation if there's something in a dispute. So as it's translated, they'll say they believe that based on all the copies that we had where there's difference, what do they call it? Errors, meaning like punctuations, words misspelling. So like they'll discern whether or not this is the correct translation, and then they'll be down here giving its caveat and who's giving the caveat. So sometimes they're much older church fathers, and some more prominent theologians, but it's really cool, So yeah, this is my Greek New Testament. But anyway, a lot of people don't understand how that gets translated, and they get it confused, and they think that it's just your interpretation. I've got a Hebrew English, Arabic English, and this was cool. I got this. It's a 1960 Jewish Bible. Don't know how to read it at all. But someday, once I get done learning Greek, I think maybe I'll try to give it a shot. So this is more of a antique, I guess you'd say. This one is just one I can actually break out, highlight, same thing, Jewish Bible. This is one of the first ones, the old Bible in a year. So I can always lend that out, somebody that's motivated like that. And then you always need a couple of extra Bibles. This was cool. This is a pocket atlas. It's even more exhaustive than Rose. So let's see, what am I reading here? Yeah, they're Greek. Yep, 100%. And do you have any works on? I don't, Anselman. I'm gonna have to look that up. So anyway, this is basically historical maps, and it's really cool. From Assyrians to Babylon. Yeah, that's why it's funny when Rob is in the comment section thinking I'm like a complete idiot when it comes to Phoenician story. I'm well aware of it. He just only wants to see it from one perspective. Readers in comparative religion. This was an interesting one. I haven't really gone through it, um, but it is kind of a neat thing to see comparably the different religions. I think it's interesting. Truth that transforms. Everybody knows Kennedy. It's kind of one of those older ones I had. This is a cool little series. The complete armor of God. The Christian in complete armor. So basically, it's your Ephesians deep study. Confessions of Saint Augustine, and then of course the same thing. This one has a little more than just the confessions. This is real old, so I don't really mess with it too much. And then, hold on. Oh, Lazy Saturday. Hey, Ron. Sorry, buddy. I didn't see you there. You there?
Bob, how's it going?
Hey, buddy. Let me see if I can turn you up.
Shelf extravaganza.
Yeah.
This concludes the audio test. How do we sound?
We sound good. How's Ron sound, everybody? I think he sounds good in my ears.
All right.
Yeah. So just going through some of my books. Pilgrim's Progress. Have you ever read that, Ron?
Yeah. That was interesting.
Yeah.
It was. Well, it's funny is for me, Lord of the Rings, the whole series it's kind of like the Pilgrim's Progress for me. It's one of those not scriptural books that I really go to and find all kinds of, I don't know, encouragement and just good story kind of stuff. So anyhow, you should have Lord of the Rings on there.
I should. You're right. I don't think. No, the C.S. Lewis books I've got, and the Tolkien. Actually, you know what? I don't have any actual physical Tolkien books, except I have them here on this.
Oh, okay. You have one?
No. This jump drive. You see this?
Oh, okay.
This has got 70,000 books.
Oh my gosh!
So I know they're on here, but
all right.
I would like an actual physical copy.
No, you passed. You're not anathema. You've got at least a jump drive.
No, you're right about Pilgrim's Progress. I think it's neat because when they title the characters, they're very explicit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Onion, Christian,
and
like the titles of the names of the characters are literally who their character is.
Yeah, there's no questioning what's going on here.
Right. You know that story, right?
Well, I think I do, but what do you think?
The story of the author, I mean?
No, what is the story of the author?
He wrote that book when he was being imprisoned.
Oh, wow.
Christian.
Oh. Ooh, no. Okay, that's a detail I didn't know.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But it's a classic. A lot of reformers like it. This one's really good. This one's the New Testament story by Ben Witherington. This one scared me at first. When I got into seminary, I was like reading about the Bible, how it was put together, how Luke had access to a lot of this. And so kind of, it's like my skeptical brain, like, what does that mean? Does that mean they just copied? No. It was interesting because it was like you could see where they were getting parables and stories from, the story goes, there was this Q document, which was written all of Jesus's sayings. And they all had access to that, but it was just a hodgepodge of stories. I thought people thought, let's write this down. But
Right.
then when they wrote the gospel, it was really from their perspective. So Luke's is Paul's perspective, even though he wasn't a witness. Luke was out there acting as a historian, interviewing people, finding out the details, you know.
Right.
Um, and then Paul was filling in the blanks for him. This is what happened.
Hmm.
And then Mark was Peter's. You could tell Mark was kind of getting his info from Peter. So anyway, it was fascinating. It freaked me out though, but it was interesting to see how we got the New Testament and the authors and why we have pretty good confidence in who wrote them.
Right.
Good old
Are
Dead
you
Sea
a
Scrolls. What?
are you a graduated
No,
seminarian?
I haven't
Okay.
finished. No, I've gone through all
Well,
the classes, but I haven't. My
no,
professors give me a hard
no,
time.
but
It's like,
you
take the
you
exam.
went no, but you did the time, so to speak. Like you did.
I paid the
That's
crime.
cool. Yeah, yeah, no. You should no. I mean, because I'm not. If you read the books and you did the stuff, then you are really a seminarian. You know what I mean?
I have so much to learn. When I talk to Matt
Well, yeah,
Skankenstein,
yeah,
he's awesome. I
yeah.
could
No,
talk to
sure.
him all day.
But I'm just trying to get up to speed with what your life experience is. That's all.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I would
And
say
that's
I'm still a novice. I'm nowhere
yeah,
near.
but you're not brand new. Like you compared to me, I'm just and I'm not trying to put myself down, but you and Matt are well read. I'll put it that way. I just didn't know where you were at with your seminarian life.
That's fair.
Um,
But I will say, you say things that I'm like, that's really good that he knows about that. You know, so like
that's,
you
yeah.
you know quite a bit yourself.
Well, I hang out with big brain people, and what falls out of their brain sometimes, if I catch it, I get big brain art too. So,
If you hang
uh,
out with me, you're going to be collecting a lot of stuff because stuff
I
falls
know, but
out.
it's entertaining. Listen, you listen. You know, you get some knickknacks on them bookshelves too. It ain't all big. It's entertaining.
Yeah,
So,
100%.
what helped you? And like, I hear horror stories of seminary, but like, what good did you get out of it, or what good book?
Well, when I first started, I really wanted truth, like about
Yeah.
history and about when somebody says, "Oh, Augustine said this," and I'd be like, I'd have to trust them that he said that, you know. And then
Right.
I started reading Augustine and realizing, okay, he said that, but he also said this.
Right.
So um, when people go back through history, they like to fish out the parts they like and paint over the ugly parts,
Okay.
you know? So I just think it's important to see where this man that people look up to in his theology is potentially flawed, you know?
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
I,
I
I
mean,
get you
it's
there.
right. Like Augustine's a perfect example. And early on, he had some unusual thoughts that weren't fully developed. But then you can see in his later writings, his clarity got a little more precise.
Okay.
Um, Paul was like that, though. You know, his first
Yeah.
book was Galatians, and it was pretty simple, angry.
Hmm.
Then maybe Colossians, depending on what order you want to put them in. But
Hmm.
then when he got to Romans, like
Yeah.
Timothy, his theology had really locked in. You know,
Hmm. Mm.
yeah, I agree, Anselm. No father was infallible, and that's the thing. I
Oh,
mean, people get mad at me for sola scriptura, and it gets strawmanned, but they're missing the point. The whole point that as a Protestant that holds to that and I wouldn't say all only Protestants, is to always hold up whatever father you're reading in light of scripture and see how on or off they were, and do the
Right.
best you can to see, in their context, at their time, what was going on, why were they thinking what they were thinking,
Right.
you know.
I mean, they were making this stuff up, or rather, they're making this thing up as they go. And I don't mean making it up as an insult.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, they're trying or figuring it out as they go. Like
Well,
what?
the Trinity's a good example of that. They're just trying to put language to it. They're trying to help people out because they see it in the Bible. They don't
Right.
know how to put language to it. So the fathers were coming up with language, and then heresies were trying to redefine words in the language they used. So then they started correcting the language, which is how we got some of the councils. And
Right.
then other heresies came in, so that they had to meet, have a council, and basically defend against the things that people were claiming in the name of Christianity.
Right. Yeah.
And for the
Yeah.
most part, everybody was on board until Chalcedon. Like, that's where Orthos and the East and the West tend to split.
Split. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
What was the one book that either resonated with you spiritually, that reflected who you were, or helped you? Like, besides, obviously the Bible, but was there,
Um,
or an author, like someone that either gets you or you get them?
all right. So because I'm more of a reference guy, right? I'm
Okay.
not into the fiction as much as
Right.
others, right?
Right.
Louis Burkhoff's systematic theology was probably the most helpful, um, because it really, and it's not perfect. There's things he says that he recognizes he doesn't understand. And so I would say that people feel like he could have done a better job. Um, but I feel like he's trying to thread the needle. But he does a really good job with the majority of it. And that's why it's so thick. It's got scriptural backups and all that. But a lot of this, like Ryan and I will read Romans in two entirely different ways. You know what I mean?
Right. No, I
And we're
get you there.
Protestant, you know, but it's, I don't know. Claire was in the channel the other day or today talking about all the denominations that we can't agree as Christians, and I'm like, that's not accurate. The
Right.
differences are very small, and we don't really hold them to the level at which other traditions hold.
Hmm.
Actually, was it PBK? Somebody was mentioning this, but it's true, and it reminded me this. If everybody held all traditions to the standard that they hold Protestants to, when they say there's 20 or 30 denominations, then
Yeah.
you say there's over 200 denominations in Orthodoxy. There's
Really?
almost that many in Catholicism. But again, it's a fair representation of Orthodox and Catholics. I just don't think Protestants should be held to that either.
That's interesting. That
Yeah.
I never really. Huh. Yeah, I'll try to wrap my head. What is that music you've got playing in the background? It sounds
Oh,
very
that's
almost middle. It's cool.
yes, David Harps and Lyres.
Oh, okay.
Speaking of harps and lyres, what do you think of that?
Get it closer, please. That's pretty cool. Bring it up closer. I'm on my phone. That's what I am. Well, all right.
I'm trying to learn how to play it, but I'm not that good. This is also a David Sling.
Okay, right.
Isn't that
Yeah.
cool? Dude, you can
Yeah.
bust open some watermelons with this bad boy.
Yeah. You can take out a few windows for sure.
There's my walking staff.
Nice.
We'll go through some fun stuff. Tell me if you like this.
All right.
This cross is a cross made out of papyrus paper.
Huh.
Yeah,
Okay.
made it out of papyrus.
I saw that.
And then this is a denarii.
Oh my gosh. Get close up.
Yeah,
Close up.
So
A denarii. That's a denarii. So that's 1 day's wages, right?
1 day's wages.
So basically, it was worth like $100 back in the day, give or take.
Well, no, this is so. Yeah, that would be fair. About $125 still.
Okay.
So that's about a day's wage for most people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, this one was from 200 to 27 BC, so just before Christ.
Wow.
So,
Dude.
but if you get one that is during Christ's time, it jacks up to $600.
Right. You know what? Jesus might have touched some mammon. Just saying.
Dude, I always kid around and say, what if this was one of the coins he said, give me a coin?
Yeah. Dude, yeah, could have been.
Just kidding.
It was out there.
This is pretty cool. This is a Sumerian tablet. So it's a replica of how big,
right.
With the cuneiform.
Yep.
You see.
Okay. Yep. Got
and
it.
This is a representation of the flood story.
You know what? I just realized. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Huh. That is pretty cool. You need a miniature Raiders of the Lost Ark on your bookshelf.
Yeah. Look, shake off the sandals.
Okay.
This one's a replica of P52.
What's that?
One of the oldest gospel fragments found.
Huh.
And the part that's on this is when Pilate is confronting Jesus and he says,
"Oh wow,
I came here to bear witness to truth." And Pilate says, "What is truth?"
Yeah. Way to go, Pilate.
Exactly. What else I got that's fun on here? That's pretty much it. Oh, this is kind of cool. You could appreciate this. So, this is my Bible holster.
What?
I used to walk around with this thing on the side of my hip.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Okay. Ancient of Days.
So that way, it's all tabbed out, and I'm talking to somebody. It's like if I want to be all portable like. Anyway, it was just a fun conversation piece to get people talking.
All right.
Did I hear somebody? Oh yeah, Simpleton. What's up, buddy?
Hello.
How you doing? Good seeing you, man.
Good seeing you. Hope all is well. Yeah,
that's good. We're doing a walkthrough of my crap, and I say crap with adoration.
That's a serious bookshelf, much more developed than what I have.
Well, it's funny. I had a bookshelf that had the little clips, and it was falling apart. And so I got this job where I had access to inexpensive wood. And so I started stockpiling the wood, and then I went for it, man. And it was a lot of work, and I built it. I mean, this
brick
is
by brick.
8 foot by 8 foot.
Gosh,
it's crazy. But I wanted to do it so that I could have plenty of room later.
Yeah, it's impressive. I'll give you that. Especially as I've made it by hand. That's a lot of respect there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It looks pretty cool. See the trim, and I have a little, lip for the bottom here. This is all flat. I kept it simple on the top, nothing crazy. And then the bottom has a simple toe kick. I didn't go crazy with it. Let's see. So I'm going through my books. I'm already up to the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's pretty cool.
Okay.
Yeah, it was cool just to have, everything that was found that's biblically relevant. I thought it was be interesting as a resource. Imitating Christ, that's a good one. Let's see, meaning of the mode of baptism. People don't that topic. This was cool. This is understanding hieroglyphics.
Okay.
So it was more of a, I don't know, what do you call it? Guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You always need to throw a fun one in, a wild card.
Yeah. So, but it is interesting for sure. Let's see. Let me just leave that out. Evidence that demands a verdict. Got volume 1 and 2 from Josh McDowell. That's a pretty good collection. For apologetics. What's this? Sinners in the Hand of an Angry God.
Is that by Jonathan Edwards?
Oh yeah.
I saw, there was a random YouTube video I saw. Someone called that spiritual abuse. I'm not sure if that's true or if that's hilarious.
Yeah, nobody wants to talk about sin. They want the God of their understanding.
Yeah, that's true. Or maybe the Calvinist version of it isn't too great. Well,
so my take is this. There's things that the Bible says that are uncomfortable. But it doesn't mean they're not true. So I'm not going to read what my desire is in the scripture. I'm just going to read it and understand it as best I can for what it says. So, like when I read Ephesians, it's a little hard to not read what that man was writing about. Now, you also have to understand contextually, when Jonathan Edwards was writing a lot of this stuff, he was calling out a society. So it's similar to a Jordan Peterson telling the kids to get out of the basement and clean their room, right?
Yeah.
But it was in more of a direct spiritual to people that were Christian.
That's true. I think the only thing I heard about that was he had a sinner's bench. He had a bench at the front of his church, in front of his pulpit, and he would make people. Was that him or was that someone else? I don't want to mischaracterize it.
I don't know. I would say it wouldn't be something. I don't think that he would have been like, "This is where you have to sit." I think it'd almost be like self-discipline in a way, kind of like how in Catholic Church you would go to get confession. It's kind of like recognizing where you're falling short, and I think that when you're in a family and everybody knows each other, it's like nobody's looking at whoever's sitting on that bench in some sort of they're heretics, Like, my brother deserves to be up there today.
Yeah,
he didn't do right. But,
okay, I get what you're saying. Sorry, I just wanted to correct myself. Apparently, it wasn't Jonathan Edwards. It was Charles Finney that started it, supposedly.
Oh yeah. Finney was a good evangelist, but I don't know some of his theology.
Oh, Wesley. Yeah, it was Wesley. And
Wesley was he was a
Wesley and Finney. And Wesley
Yeah,
was the generation after, right? It
before.
was after Edwards. Oh, before. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, Wesley actually. So let's see, 17. Well, right around the Declaration of Independence, you had. I'm having a brain fart here. You had the guy that was best friends with Wesley. Um, he came over from England. Anglicans weren't very happy with him. He kicked him out because he was preaching to the peasants.
Mm.
Uh, this is going to drive me crazy. Hold on. Wow, I deleted it. Anyway, he came over. He was one of those captivating preachers, and he had a voice. He grew up in the theater, and he wanted to be an actor, and God had other plans. He had a breaking point. He was going to a Bible college. I forget whether it was Oxford or what.
But
there was
yeah.
the Bible club. What were you gonna say?
Mm. No, go on.
So when he met Wesley, they started evangelizing in prisons, and he had a revelation, of washing the prisoners' feet, which was even more humbling than even Wesley and them. They just were there bringing food, the people that were starving in prison, and he decided to not just bring them food, but bring them, the gospel, which was a little different than the Wesley brothers were thinking. So anyway, he comes over to the United States, and it's right when Ben Franklin has already been doing the printing press, and he's been printing his sermons from over across there. And when he came, a lot of people already knew about him. So there'd be like 20,000 people there to see him preach.
Wow.
Like a Philadelphia. And back then, that would have been huge.
Yeah.
But Ben Franklin was a skeptic. So he didn't believe that one man could orally vocalize himself and speak to that many people and be heard. So when he showed up in his town, he did some calculations while he was preaching, and he was pacing off how deep the people were, and he calculated to be like 22,000.
Wow.
So he realized he was wrong because his voice had such a boom, and he was on top of this courthouse, So anyway, it was a pretty cool story. He's got an interesting story.
Yeah, I think those times were filled with, I don't know, I just recently read a book on the history of Christianity, and it seems like that Western expansion in America just did a lot of it revolutionized Christianity a lot, because it seemed as if like people were growing much faster, or churches were growing much faster than the institution could keep up at, which is why you had these people that were just traveling preachers, like the Wesleyans and stuff like that. And that's where I think Christianity, I think that's where the idea of being an evangelical kind of really starts, right? When you start saying, oh, let's just get out of there and start preaching, even if I'm not quote unquote licensed or permitted to. That's where this whole jurisdiction just goes off the walls. Maybe, I don't know.
I think you got people even now that feel burnt by certain churches, certain institutions, and they're trying to do house churches, right? On their own. Whitfield. Thank you, Anselman. Surprised that I forgot that. George Whitfield. That was
yeah. I've heard of that name.
Yeah. So the traveling circuit preacher was the best way to be able to bring the gospel message to a group that lived near each other. So like they'd show up, a couple of towns would come together because they happen to have a church built or something along those lines. Matter of fact, Whitfield, I forget the number, maybe Anselman knows, but he preached like some insane amount of sermons.
Really?
Yeah, it was crazy. But it wasn't like, I mean, if that's all they had, and once a month he was able to get there and preach a message, that's better than nothing,
True. I think, and that's why I think, especially for me as a young person, it's like it takes a lot. It's really humbling for me to not necessarily blame what people in the past did, because a lot of the times people are just doing the best they can, and so you could have questions, you could find faults, but to try not demonize people, but to try say, oh, these people weren't just horrible people, probably isn't the case, right? They were just doing the best they can with the limited resources, and they were doing what they thought was best. But then the question is, right, just because you did what you thought was best, does that mean that generations today should be doing it? And the reason I'm saying that is because you see all the chaos today, in terms of the ecclesiology of the church. Anybody could just call themselves a pastor and start his own church, and you can start from a house church, right? Like it's and also what it did was, it shifted the focus of church from the Eucharist to just hearing someone speak. I think
I would agree.
I think that does a lot of harm.
As much as I think they needed to do what they did, and that's my opinion, it definitely had consequences. I would say, though, that I would almost say it's better to frame it this way. The way that a Protestant would see it is that they weren't being progressive. The church was becoming progressive because it was evolving and changing and adding doctrine and dogma. And so come 1600, when Luther decides to nail his 95 questions to debate and ask questions about, nobody wanted to answer those questions. So the church doubled down and said no. And ultimately it ended up with him having a battle with the church, but he didn't want to demolish the church,
Yeah.
And so, and he didn't even want to print his questions. He put them up in Latin, or was it? Anyway, it was a language that the common man could not read.
Yeah, it was probably Latin then.
Yeah, the kids in the college saw it because it was on the bulletin board. The door was the bulletin board. And the kids saw it and translated it into the common tongue and then printed with the printing press. And so it wasn't like he was going into a printing press trying to subvert the church. You know what I mean? But there was enough people that realized his questions and what he was bringing up and what he was pointing to in scripture had some validity to it. And so they spurred him on. Then he had to go defend himself, and the Catholic Church kicked him to the curb. And that's kind of, yeah. So I would say that as these traditions mean well, they don't realize the consequences of their actions. Hence the Reformation. And then Protestants don't realize the consequences of their actions. Hence easy believism, prosperity gospel, non-denominational churches. Their intentions was good. Make a church that people want to come to and hear the word of God. And there might be some that are preaching the Bible faithfully, but without any kind of authority or accountability. You're basically at the whim of whoever the leader is.
Yeah.
You know, that's why I'm not a celebrity pastor guy. I don't like that. My church, even though we have a senior pastor, he really doesn't like that, and he promotes all of his other leaders to move into seminary and start preaching. So we have a total of 7 different preachers. So if one falls, he's not a celebrity,
Yeah.
you know? So there's this accountability. It's my tradition is Christian Reformed Church, and they
Okay.
have basically the polity is Presbyterian,
Mm.
but we're not Presbyterian. That's just the form of government. You know, deacons and elders.
Mm.
But yeah, I would agree. I mean, some of the denominations, because there was such sympathy to, I would argue, a liberal ideology, would allow their emotions to make decisions for the entire body. And so a lot of these schisms that happen within the denominations were, I would argue, progression of the faith again, you know, like trying to make room in leadership for people that you know, sinners belong in church, but that doesn't mean they should be pastors.
Mm.
And so, and I think that's where the Bishop of Canterbury, you know, the idea, you know, I get it, but I don't get it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. They say
You're across the pond.
How could you tell? I thought I had an amazing American accent.
No, I think we talked before.
Yeah, we have.
Stream?
Yeah, I think it may have been was it Jacob's channel or?
I think it was.
Yeah, maybe Jacob. Yeah, Jacob's channel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
T is so funny. Teo, she looked fire 3 hours ago. Who is he talking about? I don't know what they're talking about. Good.
I think I was in the chat previously debating Anselmian about whether I think we were arguing over whether like the manifestations of God in the Old Testament, whether they were created or uncreated.
The manifestations meaning what?
So this is actually an interesting question. When Moses saw the angel of the Lord in the burning bush, was that angel created or uncreated? Or was what he saw created or uncreated?
All right, so I'll just speak from my theology, right?
Mm.
Everything God created. So I would say outside of the Trinity, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, all things came from them. So the angel of the Lord is a little bit special.
Okay.
Because now we're talking about potential, some would argue and debate that if the angel of the Lord shows up to, say, Joshua, and they tell him to take off his sandals like Moses or something like that, or they accept bowing when other angels would say, don't do that.
Mm.
Some would say the thought is that this was a Christology, a Christophany.
Yeah.
A pre-incarnation of Christ in history.
Mm.
So it's kind of a cool topic. I like it. Melchizedek is one of them. Melchizedek with Abraham.
Yeah.
Um,
Even
yeah,
even the parents of Abraham himself, right? Before Sodom was destroyed, Abraham was greeted by 3 guests.
yep. And one was different than the other two, right? Yeah.
And then Jesus said in the New Testament, Abraham saw my day and he was glad.
Yes.
So it's like, who met Abraham that day? Especially the funny thing is when Sodom and Gomorrah is getting destroyed, the Bible says the Lord rained down fire from the Lord in heaven. And it's like, what does that mean?
I almost feel like the way that it reads, how he's negotiating with God, which is so funny. Like it's like God's placating him. If there's 50, Lord, would you, if there's 40, what about 30? Bear with
10?
me.
10?
10?
Yeah.
And then it gets all the way to 1 and it's like, wow. I almost feel like, I wonder, I don't think the timeline is explicit, but I wonder if it was during the meal that Sarah provided where this conversation took place, because it was right before that.
Yeah. Yeah. Possibly. Yeah.
And those
The
two
reason,
angels that were with
yeah.
him, I think there's writings about the two strangers entering into Sodom, meeting Lot.
Yeah. And getting them out of there.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say that, right, it sounds like to me, it could sound like to anybody hearing it from the first time, oh, this is a very interesting, like, Bible. People could say like, oh, it's just like a Nephilim, right? It's some extra piece of lore that you hear in the Bible, or like the Book of Enoch, right, which is all biblical but not in the Bible, kind of. But the reason I bring it up, like theologically, is because I was reading some guy called Romanides. I think he's quite interesting, and he basically says that the whole point of Christianity, it's the continuation of the experience of God that the prophets had, that the apostles had, and now the saints have today. And so I've been reading this as well. I've been thinking about this. When Jesus Christ says, it's a New Testament in my blood, I think he's the only one allowed to say that because he's the one that gave the Old Testament.
Yeah.
It was him that spoke to Moses right on the mountain and gave the Old Testament. It wouldn't make sense for him to, obviously he's God, right? But to me, it would make sense that if he gave the New Testament, he also gave the Old Testament. And so the experience of God that Moses had, the experience of God that Isaiah had, the experience of God that Abraham had, is the same one that the apostles had. And it's the same one that people today can still have. And we see that in the lives of the saints. The reason I'm bringing this up is because if you go to a few Orthodox churches, some of them a very important icon is the three visitors, and they often have that either. I've seen in some churches where they have it above the altar, or they have it like behind the church or behind the altar. And if they're saying that Christ met Abraham, and then they also have that contrasting with the Last Supper as well, so they're basically saying the supper, God has already dined with man, with Abraham. And then now he dined with Moses, right? Because in Israel, you have the 70 elders in the book of Exodus. It says that they beheld the God of Israel. They saw his feet and they ate and drank. So God has always come to commune with mankind in some sort of way. And it was a direct communication, not through created forms. And then now Christ came himself in the Last Supper. So I think that's important. If you say that this is the last thing I'll say. If you say that it's created, in some sense, you're saying that man has never directly experienced God. And if you're saying that, then to me, that's kind of scary because Christ came to give us the experience of God, right? And that experience of God hasn't stopped and it won't stop. But maybe that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
I know someone in the chat said that
think-
Romanese is a suspect, but I think on some parts, he's very, very, very good on some parts. And
I would
read all of them.
say if it was a Christophany,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and there's clearly something going on there. I would say, yeah, that's not created, right? So I was trying to tread a line without saying this is definitely a Christophany or this is definitely because like the other side of the argument is that God could be present in front of this angel while the
Mm-hmm.
angel simultaneously is standing there in front of this man. So it's almost like the angel is able to stand before God and deliver his message to man, right? But I think, like you, I think it's probably a Christophany, and I would
Mm.
argue that yeah, it's you know, I mean, I would even argue like when you hear this term, whether it was a analogy or a symbol, when he hid Moses in the crack of the rock and
Mm.
he passed by and allowed him to see his backside. Well, we
Mm.
know God the Father is spirit. He's not a physical body except in the person of Christ.
Mm.
So if he literally saw the back of somebody, maybe it was the backside of, you know, Christ
Christ,
in
of the
in a,
resurrected Christ.
yeah, well, like back in time, right?
Yeah, because he
Yeah,
goes, yeah,
it's just interesting. I think it's fun talking about it because it's like kind of, I guess this is how the Orthodox get excited about stories, you know. I think it's unfortunate they get so excited about reading saint stories that it seems like they don't get as excited about talking about we're talking about sometimes. You know, like I know some
yeah.
that,
I agree. I agree. I agree.
you know, but I would agree with you that um, it's it's beautiful to have the conversation and imagine this is how it is. Like this is probably Christ wrestling with Jacob,
Hmm.
you know?
Who was
Um,
talking to Adam in the garden?
yeah, like was it a metaphorical? I walked with God and talked with God, or was it Jesus?
I just want to. I think I've seen part of the chat. I'm not saying that Christ's flesh is uncreated. No, that would make me monophysite, and that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying though is that Moses, Isaiah, all Ezekiel, I believe that all these guys, all these prophets, they had an experience of they had an experience of the uncreated manifestation of God. Because I think the reason why this is important, right? Not only because it's cool stuff to hear, but it's in terms of our Trinitarian, it's in terms of our theology, right? Because, and please correct if I'm wrong, I'm not a theology person myself. But then, okay, so let's say God speaks to, then I think if you're saying that God can't enter time and space in an uncreated way, then you're cutting God off from creation. And that means that the only way God communicates with his creatures is with symbols and with created things. And that means that you don't have a direct experience of God, which means that you're always going to be, in a sense, guessing, did I really experience God? Did I really see him? Do you get what I'm saying? If you always have to work with that barrier or that veil over your face, then it says something about a theology, in my opinion. That's
So, right, the Monophysite. So the deal is Christ is begotten, not made, right? So he wasn't created. He isn't a creation. Um, I think that his incarnation and becoming present and dwelling with us in creation is what is so spectacularly amazing, you know?
mm,
That's why if these are Christophanies, I don't think it's Jesus in the flesh. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's probably maybe similar to after he was resurrected, you know. But I
Yeah,
do think,
that's what I think.
I mean, we don't know whether Thomas actually touched him, right? I mean, he offered it. I figured if he's offering, that means he could have done it. So I feel like, but it is interesting because with Mary, she had this compulsion of emotion to cling to Jesus
Mm,
when she saw him. And Jesus said, no,
mm,
don't cling to me. But then when she met with Thomas, Thomas was the opposite. He actually needed to
yeah,
have physical touch. So it's almost like a correction from both extremes, you
yeah,
know? Um, so, yeah, and his ability to disguise himself with the guys on the road to Emmaus,
yeah, yeah,
um, walk through walls and just appear in the room with the disciples behind the locked door. So there's definitely some uh, not the normal, more supernatural than ever was before when he was with them, you know, outside of the miracles that were supernatural, you know.
yeah. It's I think it's something to ponder because Christ says he's come to give. He says in John, he says, "Oh Father, give me the glory which I had with you before the world was created." And then he also then prays for his apostles and says that he hopes that they will have that same glory that Christ had before. So then the apostles are getting uncreated glory. Also in the book of, I think it's the Old Testament in Leviticus, the people see the glory of God. The Israelites, they see the glory of God. So the question is, was what they and they bow down after they saw the glory of God. Was that created or uncreated? Um, I think that's important because I think the whole point of God united with the man is that God's glory shines throughout all creation and permeates all creation. And if we're denying that that can happen, then it's like, what's the point in God creating them? You know, is heaven really going to join onto earth, or is earth going to be this phantasm, or is heaven going to be this phantasm whereby, we just all stare at some big screen and contemplate, the divine essence, or is God really going to unite with earth and we still being like physical matter with bodies?
Well, it says they're going to have bodies, you know, and yeah, I don't know how this whole heaven is going to work. I don't know how the new Jerusalem and the new earth is going to work. I don't know in what time scale the end of the age is going to manifest itself, but it does say, you know, even the dead are going to rise and we're all going to be held accountable. It talks about this perfect body, you know, this being remade
Mm,
in a physical sense. So I don't know. I feel like it's
yeah.
bizarre because, but I wanted to actually, um, I think what's interesting, and I don't think it's a deal breaker, but that's because I'm a Protestant, right? Is the way that the Trinity is perceived. I think that, like you, when you start playing a little bit too much with the natures of Christ, um, you do risk some stuff. But I think that if you believe a certain thing and you're wrong, you know, God can choose regardless. So if He wants to call your heart and He wants to bring you in to His eternal bliss, so to speak, that's His prerogative. Um,
Mm,
to doubt that He was truly human and truly divine would probably be the hardest thing that I could see Him not having a problem with. but
Mm.
the idea of blending them or separating them, um, I'm gonna hold it loose. I can't, it was like what? Hold on, I got it right here. Actually, I did a whole Trinity thing on this.
Is someone trying to guess where I'm from? And is that in the comments? Sorry.
Well, he's originally from, well, he's Georgian,
Yeah, I can tell
but
by the typically or I pronounce
yeah,
that.
but he's lived in the UK.
Oh, okay.
Let's see here. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, 451.
Yeah,
It
Chalcedon.
was,
Yeah.
yeah. So, you know, when they finally settled it all out, not only did they say truly man, truly God, and they emphasized his completeness and unity of both natures without mixture, confusion, division, or separation. And then it also says, with each nature retaining his own attributes. And that's probably where the East and the West start dividing.
You mean like the Eastern? You mean the Chalcedonians and the non-Chalcedonians?
Well, when the
Is that what you mean?
Chalcedon happened, everybody seemed to be good. But then a council or two later, there seemed to be a belief that they went back on their word and changed the language. And so I think it was what, 600? And I would say that escalated to about 900,000 AD. And that's when what, the Great Schism?
Yeah, 1054. I think. Well,
Yeah.
maybe. I think I have a different view. I feel like, in my opinion, to understand Chalcedon, you have to understand 381. In my opinion, 381 is probably the most important. It's one of the most important councils because it really rubber stamps Nicaea, and it goes
Yeah.
against Apollinarius. This whole thing about Nestorius basically started off. I could be wrong here, but basically, you have this guy called Apollinarius. He's a heretic. He basically says that Christ had no soul; it was a logos instead of Christ's soul. And so a guy called Diodor from Tarsus. So these guys are all in Turkey. So Diodor Tarsus writes against Apollinarius, and Diodor supposedly goes too far by basically having two sons. And then Theodore mobs to Estia. Sorry, I'll get there. Theodore mobs to Estia. He then learns from Diodor Tarsus, and then Nestorius learns from Theodore mobs to Estia, and that's how you get 431. And 451 is all. We don't think we really reconciled 431 properly. So I think 381, if you understand that bit, that's kind of what causes the divisions between that's what kind of causes Chalcedon to have that bust up, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And then also because in 381 you have Constantinople being put as number 2 in terms of the ranks of the churches. In Nicaea it was Rome, Alexandria, Antioch, with Jerusalem getting an honorable mention. In Constantinople 1 you have Constantinople being put as number 2, and Alexandria was not happy with that. Sorry, but your point about the East-West schism, I think, to be honest, I think even by the Sixth Council, the theology is basically very similar, the same, basically. Because even the Filioque isn't really accepted in the Sixth Council. I think what happens is the Franks, right, these Germanic peoples, they take over most of Western Europe, or the former Western Roman Empire, and they basically bully the Pope into accepting the Filioque and making so many changes. So I think if you want to see where the Great Schism starts, I think it starts around the year 800 when Charlemagne gets into power, because that's when you see a lot of changes being made. Charlemagne brings his own Frankish people who do theology into it. Sorry, the last thing I'll say in terms of evidence. Sorry, last thing I'll say is this: the way I know that I think I'm correct on this. The Seventh Ecumenical Council, Nicaea II, the East accepted it, Rome accepted it as well, but Charlemagne's theologians didn't accept it. Charlemagne's theologians wrote a book called the Libro Carolingiani or something, which basically denied Nicaea too, but they had basically bad translation supposedly. And I think that's where the diversion starts to shift because these Franks start to push Rome into accepting their theology over the theology of the Greeks. But maybe that's my
No, I
thought.
think you're accurate. I think they were. This is what I was saying. They were complaining that what we agreed on originally was being taken back, and there
Yeah,
was
yeah,
like
yeah. Okay.
betrayal. Um, and then when the West was saying this is how it is, you know, like suck it up, that really wasn't very acceptable.
Mm.
Um, but do you ever watch? Do you know Sam? You ever watch his stuff in the TLC?
Tideman.
Sam Tiedemann.
Tiedemann, sorry. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've watched his stuff. I think he's a smart guy. I think his opinions are interesting. I don't
Yeah,
know how he could. Yeah.
he's he's. I kid around about him because he's almost like a conspiracy theorist in church history.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I've watched some of his videos. They make me laugh. They're quite interesting.
But the way he comes off, it's hysterical. I don't take him, like it's almost like a character at this point. Um, he thinks he knows history better than history knows history. And of course, this was political. And of course, they had this secret meeting that isn't documented, but we know what they really said. And we know why
Mm.
they really did this. And it's like, I don't think it. I don't think you can completely politicize
Yeah,
God's, holding churches together.
yeah,
However he
yeah,
chooses to do it.
yeah. I agree. I think he does have some good points, right? I think the fact that he says that some things are expressly political, I think that is true. And I think that's one thing that, if we're going to be honest with church history, we probably need to come to
Sure.
grips with that. It was heavily political. For example, in the year 380, Theodosius, the emperor who eventually calls Constantinople one, he declares that he basically says that the Catholic faith is basically Nicaea. He puts it into Roman law, right? And he says that everybody has to follow the Catholic faith that was given to Peter, to the Romans, and in this day it's held by the Pope of Rome, Pope Damasus, or yeah, I think it's Pope Damasus, and Peter. Was it Peter of Alexandria? Whoever whoever the
Gregory.
Pope of no, there was a Pope of Alexandria. So he basically says, if you agree with the Pope and the Roman Pope, the Pope in Rome and the Pope of Alexandria, you're Catholic. That's what he basically says. And then even after Constantinople one, he says that to be Catholic, you have to be communion with like 8 different bishops. One of them
Right.
is Theodore of Tarsus. The other is Gregory of Nyssa. He says this after the council, mind you.
Yeah,
So
but these aren't popes at the time. They are the head of the church in those
yeah,
cities.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what I was saying was you have a political ruler telling people if you're not Catholic, if you're not in communion with these people, he made it into Roman law. And I think he even had some laws basically say that paganism has to go. Basically, you can't be a pagan anymore. If you're a heretic, we're confiscating your property. Imagine today, right? If you were called, if for example, I'm in the UK, right? The established church is the Church of England. Imagine you're a different Christian denomination, and they said, if you're, for example, I don't know, a Methodist or you're Catholic, you your property is going to go to the state. You can't leave behind it. Your children can't inherit any property. You'd think that's kind of crazy, and that's basically what happened in that time period.
Uh, I mean, I would definitely say that. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, good. I would definitely agree with you that politics clearly played a part.
Mm,
And I would be an idiot to not admit that it didn't have some sort of part to play. I just think he overplays how much of the politics because when you start talking politics, I think what happens is you can say whatever you want about how people think. Even though he's reading writings, he's reading them through a lens, I think, that is, he's reading them through a Unitarian skeptic lens. So it's like, you know, the term exegesis and eisegesis, right?
Yeah, I do.
All right. It's like he's eisegesising the writings to try to validate his how he sees the Trinity. And so he's probably not one of the more extreme Unitarians in the traditional sense. It's kind of like when somebody says they're a Universalist. Um, there's so many different types of Universalists. So it's like some of them are more extreme than others. But you could also argue that about Calvinists. I mean, if I tell somebody that I'm Calvinist, they'll say, "Oh, so you're a determinist." And I'm like, well, I mean, technically, yeah, but there's also like I distinguish soft determinism versus hard determinism. And I'll say, they'll argue that, yeah, so like hyper Calvinist versus, it's like, no, man, I don't believe that we shouldn't go out and preach the gospel. I don't believe that it's pointless to pray, which ultimately that's what hyper Calvinists do. And that's why people, I think, hate Calvinism, because I think it has damaging effects. You know what I mean?
Well,
So,
yeah, I get that. I think what another reason why people, if you did bring it back to Calvinism, so forgive me if I don't mean to offend, but I do want to make a
no,
comment about that.
I just have to speak from my tradition, just like you would speak from yours, right?
Yeah, I think though this is part of the I think this is part of the issue, right? You say that, for example, Sam, he reads church history with a Unitarian lens, but I think a lot of people would say Calvinists read the church fathers, or even the church fathers with a Calvinist lens, or they read Paul in a Calvinist lens and not in a more patristic or typically Catholic lens. Because I'll give an example, right? Calvinism, correct me if I'm wrong, it says it agrees with double predestination, as in some sense, God predestines some people to hell.
Right.
But then that's refuted and called absurd in the Council of Orange in 529. So 1,000 years before Calvinism even gets off the ground, the church has already decided, hey, this is a crazy idea.
Have they decided it?
Look it up. The Council of Orange in 529.
I have. What about Augustine? What did he say about predestination?
But and this is another thing, right? When was Augustine's writing of predestination ever taken up as ecumenical in a council?
I'm just saying there's things that they never address things unless they felt they had a problem with it. So if a heresy came up, they would address it, right?
Yeah. And I'm saying that in 529 there was a council, and they addressed that this predestination thing isn't what we've believed.
Yeah, they did a lot of things that weren't right throughout church history. I would even argue that you could argue the iconoclasm is a good example of that. So
100%.
politically or from a power structure, the church was progressing in a way that the original first 300 years wasn't doing, And so like when we look at some of the writings of the early church fathers that were trying to figure out this Trinity thing, and we look back in history and say they were heretics, but well, they were just trying to figure this out, right? Origen didn't have it all figured out. It wasn't like he was useless, but he had some benefits and brought value to the church community. Augustine didn't have it all figured out, but he brought value to the church community and how he was understanding these things. But nobody was saying, well, I guess you could argue that some people did persecute Augustine, but it's one of those things where they're all trying to figure this stuff out, but adding new doctrine seems to not be what the early church fathers were about. You could argue the Trinity, and how they came up with it, understanding the three persons and understanding the two natures, is doctrine. And I would agree, yes, okay, it's doctrine, but there wasn't like this. People were already knowing that this was the thing. They were just putting language to it to push back against what was trying to be creeping into the church, right? So
Yeah.
when the church fathers debated these things, they didn't debate based on the writings of Polycarp or Augustine or Origen. Those guys would debate their opinions and they would write their letters, but they always used scripture and defended their beliefs through scripture. And as time goes on through progression, we start finding people reading back into history, like you just said, their own belief structure into what some of the early fathers were saying. And so you get this progression, this accretion that comes over time where icons develop and we go from praying for the saints to praying to the saints. So the words start changing. So all I would say is this. I would say that all three, Catholics, Orthodox, and Protestants, were formed out of that early church body of understanding. And when the church actually got control of a state, right? As good as it was for Constantine to stop the persecution and the killing, but then what is it? Dionysus is the one that made it a state religion. Once that
It's
happened,
Theodosius in 380. 380.
yeah,
Theodosius.
Theodosius, yeah. And so once that happened, I think it goes against, and orthodoxies would argue this all day long. It should have never happened. We shouldn't have been in charge of a nation. We shouldn't have been political. We shouldn't have been a Christian nationalist, right? And as they got the power and they started holding sway over empires or emperors, it started to get a lot more difficult to parse out and keep things, like we would say modern day audience capture, And it's like, but now to defend the church or they were like, why would you build a cathedral that looks so amazing and costs too much money while people are starving? Well, their justification was we have these huge castles and kingdoms where the emperor lives, and they're trying to compete in authority and an audience capture of the population. So the more grand and glorious things that we build in the name of God is going to make people be in awe, as they come into these spaces. And so these spaces get kind of held up to into a higher place in people's hearts and what their significance was. But they were trying to capture the people, right? And hold on to the people. And so I understand why the things happened, but I think that if we were honest in looking back in church history, it's helpful to not quote the church fathers as much, because it's not that they didn't bring great points to it, but you say, okay, he said this. Let me forget my tradition. Let me go back and read biblically what Paul was saying, what the Gospels were saying. When Jesus said this, what was he doing? Oh, it says Jesus went into the synagogue. They read, they prayed, they sang the Psalms, they talked, they broke bread. Wow, that sounds like a church, you know? And so like that's one thing I like about the Orthodoxy is they do a lot of the similar things. My church does a similar thing where we're trying to move away from how evangelicals have taken over the seeker sensitive movement. You know what I mean? So we're trying to move away from that.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like you recognize what happened, the negatives and the outcomes that happen, and you try to make a correction. Always using the Bible. So saying this church father, this council, let's use the Bible. let's not go back to what someone said once at a council. You know, it was written. So this is what was written. And then we hold them higher than what we have in Scripture, and we call them saints, or we call them, something special. And it would be always years later, right? It wouldn't be like when they were still living, they say, you're a saint. Although nowadays, I think they do that, right? But they distinguish saints, right? There's two types of saints.
I don't think the Orthodox or Catholic Church would ever pronounce it living saint. I don't think that's
Say it again.
So
Say it
I
again,
don't
simpleton.
I don't think the Orthodox Church would ever pronounce that there's a living saint, like officially. I don't think anybody in the church would ever say this. What I mean by that is that not that they aren't, not that the people aren't saints, but the official title of sainthood won't be granted while someone's alive.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, see, as a Protestant, I would say all believers, right? We are the priesthood of believers, right? So all of us, when you hear him discussing the saints, he's talking about believers, right? So when that term is used, that's how it was used. And so it seems like as they die, because they were someone of adoration, right? Like Polycarp, you know. Ironically, Polycarp doesn't get a lot of credit. Sometimes I wish Orthodox would read a little bit of him a little more if they look back in church history and they're doing just like Protestants do and just like Catholics do, cherry picking church fathers. It would be interesting to hear how they take what he's saying. And here is a guy that literally was brought up in the church and discipled by John, you know? I mean, but yet he gets zero credibility, and what he writes, nobody wants to talk about. Meanwhile, he literally was a disciple of John. So, like when we talk about apostolic succession, I always get a kick out of that. It's like, what, here's a guy that got martyred, man, and he was in charge. He was leading a group, and he was speaking and sharing what John had taught him. But yet the things that he was saying don't line up with a lot of modern traditions. And so he gets cast aside, you know. But like I said, all church fathers, that's what happens. It's, people take what they like that seems to work out in their modern frameworks at each time periods as church goes on. And it's, yeah, there's like this affinity for them, and so like that's what they're holding on to. I do think it's interesting how the East kind of seem to we know the Eastern religions, right? Like it, you know, East Asia and how they had that Eastern type of tradition, right? And how it's interesting how a lot of that mysticism and that sort of stuff that was already in the waters in those traditions, and as Christianity was branching out and expanding into those traditions, it reminds me of when we bring Christianity to Haiti. You have people that are Haitian that are still, they're claiming to be Christian, but they're still practicing voodoo, but it's not the voodoo that we see on TV. So like somehow their culture tries to seep into Christianity, and that's kind of what I think has happened a little bit with the Eastern Orthodoxy, where there's a lot more emphasis on the mystical elements of how they read scripture. I don't necessarily disagree with some of it, Are you in the tube?
Sorry, no, I'm on the bus. Is the
Oh,
background noise that bad? I'll mute myself.
no, you're good. So I think it's
I'm about to
interesting.
go overground. I'm about to go underground. So if I hop off in like 5 minutes, please forgive me.
No
But yeah,
problem.
I think you're right. I myself am coming from a Protestant background, so I think I talk to Eastern Orthodox people in real life, and I agree with what you're saying. It seems a lot of them know more of like saints than they do know about Elijah's story themselves. Like they've read the Book of Kings, etc. They know what happened to David in depth, Do they really study these things like the Jews did? I think your point's helpful. Like, I think we as Christians are going to do better when we all get a bit close, when you all go back to the Bible and try to understand it from that basis, instead of just throwing fathers at each other. Because I agree with what you're saying, you can throw fathers at each other all day long, you can throw counsels at each other all day long. But I think if you all kind of start with the Bible and say, okay, do you all understand this the same way? Then that could be helpful. And that's why I brought up the fact about God's glory being created or uncreated in Leviticus 9, right? Because that's a real question we have to answer. If the person who met Abraham and Moses, the person who was seen by Isaiah and Ezekiel wasn't Jesus Christ himself, or the word incarnate, then maybe we have a serious problem in how we're interpreting the Bible. And if our traditions that were made in the 16th century are making us read it in this way, in a uncomfortable or problematic way, then maybe we should rethink how we see it. And that's why I see someone like N.T. Wright a lot with his new kind of, not new, but his theology. It's quite very, very biblical, and it's very interesting.
All right, I'm starting to lose you.
Oh, sorry. Maybe it's the connection, but I'm gonna head up now.
Okay, hit me back up if you can.
Yeah, we'll do.
Thanks,
Bye.
Simpleton.
Appreciate the chat. Lots of speaking.
That was awesome. He's on Jacob's stream a lot, so that's cool. Where was I? Oh yeah. Consequences of Ideas. Philosopher's Worst Nightmare. Yeah, people don't like that book. No Other God. 5 Views of Apologetics by Grundy. Some different ways. This is a really good book. Christian Thought by Justo Gonzalez. I like this a lot. And then the Dictionary of the Early Church Beliefs. I think that's awesome. We were kind of talking a little about that. I feel like there's some feedback. You guys hear the feedback? A little bit of static. Yes, I have a copy of the Quran. I guess I'm not getting any. Nobody say anything about static. Not bad. Okay. Everyone in the Bible. Oh, I skipped Josephus. This is his complete works. Yeah, he's pretty awesome from a historical, just some insight. The rest of these, and then even up here, these are really good Bible study things. So like you could take one of these and have a Bible study on it. So like the life and ministry of Jesus Christ and the Messiah. The Messiah is the first one. Challenging tradition. Following Jesus. So like they're really cool studies. Answering the Call. The Cross and the Resurrection. These are the same. These are Tyndale commentaries, but these are all smaller versions of commentaries. And then up here, these were cool. So you have the Leader's Guide, and then you have the book, Leader's Guide book. So these are good Bible study references, tools. All right, these are some of these I haven't read yet. Freedom, Justice, and Hope. Christ of the Empty Tomb by Boyce. I've heard about them. The Gospel of Matthew. This is a Barclay. Anselman brought that up. Yeah, some of these too are from back in the self-help 90s Christian You Are What You Think, The Man in the Mirror, some old school Joyce Myers, which I'm not a big, whatever. But some of these are not really great, but they're interesting. Secret of the Vine, The Red Sea Rolls, Letters from God, Chuck Swindoll's Wisdom for the Way. What else? Manuscript. It's like a Promise Keeper. What's Your God Language? That's a pretty decent book by P. Green. Oh yeah, good old Ragamuffin Gospel. That's a fan favorite. Rich Mullins and Michael W. Smith did a foreword for it. Redefining Life for Men, Choosing God's Best, A Walk Across the Room. I have my disagreements with that book. Let's see. There's plenty of contradictions. That's for another stream. I've got, again, more point of reference, the Jeremiah Study Bible, David Jeremiah. That's an NKJV. So I think if I was going to look at the King James Version, the New King James is a little more helpful. But I think it's important to have different translations. The Message, not a big fan, but when somebody brings it up, I think it's important to see how certain scriptures are framed. Wild at Heart, that's an old one. Tim Keller, Preaching, An Undivided Heart, and then these 3 volumes are my hard copies of the world literature that you have in that hard drive. So like I have a lot of old world literature. You have the Iliad and the Odyssey, you have all that stuff in there. And then on that hard drive as well. Study of the Parables. Oh, here's an old one that pisses people off. Boundaries. That is one of those recovery books. Experiencing God. When Men Think Private Thoughts. Unseen Essentials. Yes, more of that stuff too. The Work of John Owens. Hooah!
What is this one?
Oh, Calvin's New Testament commentaries. Yeah, I don't have as much Calvin as people think. I've got some, but this is really old. I don't even know what this is. Let's check it out. Pauline and Other Studies. What year? This is an old one. Hold on a minute. This is a bummer. I don't see an actual date. Let's see. My cat's over here going crazy. Hold on a minute. Basil the Great in the back. Aberdeen University Press. Yeah, this one I have to get dated. Old school map in the back. Old. Let's see here. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, it's the Pauline world, 44 AD to 60 AD. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of a bummer that it says out of date, but you can kind of tell it's pretty damn old. I think I saw Bison in the comments. Three Sons and Sinners. No, Three Free Sins. Yeah, I think Steve Brown regrets that title, but it's a good book. Steve Brown's awesome. Right from Wrong, Josh McDowell. Piper, good old Piper. Let the Nation Be Glad. People don't like him. The Late Great Planet Earth. Purpose Driven Life. Yeah, it was a good book when I read it. But now I kind of have a different theology and see things a little different. Biblical Numerology. This is a really good book. People that put too much emphasis on numbers or not enough emphasis when it needs it. Let's see here. Letters to a disciple, sorry. And then, so now, let's see. Oh yeah, I got Rubik's Cubes up there. Any Rubik's Cube lovers? Look at this guy. That's an 11 by 11. I solved it once, just once, and then I let my nephew scramble it. I got a cool mask on the islands. It's kind of cool. I got a waterproof Bible, for those greater ingression protocols. Bring it out there and not worry about it getting wet. And then I have a lot of my old college books. All of my math. From pre-calculus to Calc 2. What else? Beginning programming. Algebra, psychology, history, world history, American history, engineering, and then I got out of college. What else is here? Godfather Returns. Not a very biblical book. Some of these are just biographies from like football players, motorcycle riders. Some are political. Oh yeah, the 9/11 Commission report. Read that whole thing and marked it up. The conspiracy theorists out there. I'm with you. I got a book of zingers. Have fun with that. Yeah, so that's pretty much what we got. Right now, actually, no. Getting ready to start this one. Furious. It's this guy Daniel Colindo. Yeah, he wrote a book on Galatians, and I'm interested in hearing his take because this is how I see the book of Revelations. It's probably the most angry you ever hear Paul, um, and yet still showing love, but clearly not happy. Um, so I find that pretty interesting. I love how people like to read Jesus is always saying the loving thing, or Paul. It's like, do you read the whole Bible? That was a cool break with Simpleton. Um, yeah, I like Simpleton. He's he's always nice. Jacob's channel, he pushes back the way you'd like a Christian to push back. Um, I know you guys are great readers, and I am a big fan of books. But like Al, I have a learning disability. So, in order for me to really grasp what I'm reading, I have to read and listen. Um, one thing that has been helpful on ones that come out in audio later, or I'm able to figure it out, find it in audio. I'm usually, I've already read the book, but my preferred consumption is reading and listening at the same time. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know how you read Galatians any other way. I mean, I would say that almost all Christian traditions believe that the circumcision was no longer needed. Some would argue that the baptism took its place, but the point is that he didn't bring that up as, no, this is it, not this, is interesting to me. So I don't know how you can see it another way. Yeah, it seems like he lays out specifically the gospel. Again, how shocked he is that so many of these are pulling away and allowing people to distort the gospel. So yeah, I mean, I get that Protestants are framed as misusing it against Catholics, but that's not how I read it. Yeah, it's helpful. I've tried reading out loud, and it's helpful. I probably get a little exhausted, But yeah, I do agree. I think Protestants have, in an effort to push back on traditions claiming certain things being sacramental, we've kind of minimized them. And I don't think that's right either. Same with Mary. It's like we over swung on the pendulum, and some Christians just like in politics, right? You get a small group way over here of extremists that are talking bad about things. And it's like, no, we should hold up the value of ordaining priests, the marriage, the funeral, under the right. I guess under the way that the family needs at the time. Confession, I think, yeah, we should be doing that more. But yeah, we've definitely thrown the baby out with the bathwater, in an effort to distance ourselves from the verbiage of sacrament. And it's funny, if that wasn't made a sacrament, how much more would people be actually doing it and enjoying it and not pushing away from it? I don't know. It's an interesting thing. Consequences of ideas, consequences of propositions. So I would say, yeah, that sucks. But as a Christian, we hold marriage sacred, not sacramental. We hold ordination to be special. You know, God's calling on someone, and the external and the internal call. Confession, God, you know, to confess to God is definitely one thing, and the desire to do that, and the ability to do that. However, confessing to another brother, that still takes a lot of guts. A lot more than going to a closet talking to a priest that's bound by secrecy. I feel like if the Protestants that do practice confessionalism have a lot of balls, you know, because there's a trust that you're having in your brother. Funerals, we'll have our disagreements on, do we pray to our relatives or not? But that'd be probably where that goes a little awry from a Protestant perspective. And that's probably why a lot of Protestant traditions do celebrations of life. But clearly people need to be able to grieve and have a process. So I think I'm open to however the family needs to process it. Oh, let me show you this. You can see my study board. Let's see. You see it? That's my dry erase board. So I built it from 2x4s. I made a mistake. I put the glow light facing down towards the board instead of into the glass, so it doesn't make it light up like that. See how much better that looks? But you live and learn. So yeah, this is my Greek board. I've got your cases and numbers. And these go on the tail of the root word. And then substantive, attributive, predictive. And that's this little guy that goes on. And then the gender, this goes on the front. That's how you know the gender. And then you know, like we said, numbers and cases, unless you know if it's plural or singular. present active indicative. That's the voice. So you got tense, voice, and mood. So the I, you, he, we, y'all, they, and then these are some of the vocabulary words that I was working on. So yeah, and then I got a little art here. Here, you icon people. What do you think? That's Thomas Blackshire. The lilies. We got some other little stuff up top there. Pictures of the family. And I got this one. Can't wait to see what people are saying on this. The Calvinist is making icons. Okay, good. But yeah, it was fun setting this office up. I had a good time with it. Oh yeah, I got a print of Cafe Starry Night. Didn't go. About all I got in here. But yeah, how long did we go? 2 hours and 11 minutes. Good Lord. And we only had 2 people come in. Outrageous. Outrageous. Let's see. Anybody call me a heretic? I'm trying to figure out Ulysses Unitarian. I feel like that might be Claire. Maybe not. Maybe Rob. I don't know. It's weird because they actually have a avatar. Oh. She, he, whoever it is, wanting me to show my Quran off. Bison, man, you're the man. Mark. I had a tea pop in. Archer. I don't know who Super Mario Pancakes is. Funny name. And of course, Miss B. Am I missing anybody? Probably going to cut this off here unless anybody comes in and wants to chat. Hanselman, you're so funny. Thanks, Anselman. Appreciate you guys being here. I'm going to kill her. We'll talk soon.